just made me start crying even more. Like, I was just like, what does that even mean? In that moment, like, what does that mean? And like, as I thought about it later, like, it was really just like a confirmation of the gospel in my life. Like, it was like what the salvation that I had when I was 5 meant that now in my darkest moments, everything's going to be okay. Like, I'm going to get through it. It's going to, this too shall pass, so to speak. Hi, my name is Brandon Swain. I'm a pastor and elder at Renovation Church in North Syracuse, New York. And this is my Faithly story.
Could you tell me how your faith journey started?
Yeah, man, that's a long story. But anyway, yeah, I was born and raised in Akron, Ohio. Was my where my stomping grounds are, I guess, or hometown is. So if you're a LeBron fan, I'm from his hometown, and he actually played at my high school once, which was pretty crazy to think about. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in a vaguely Christian home. I mean, my grandma and grandparents are very involved in the church. My mom, saw all the benefits of like raising a son in the Christian faith and all that kind of stuff as well. So she sent me to a Christian school and sent me to various church activities when I was younger. And yeah, I mean, when I was about 5, I remember going to Awana, which, if anybody knows what that is, like, those Wednesday night type things. Like, I always had all the badges and stuff like that. And Awana, I was having continued into the summer at VBS, and at the VBS, it was like they presented the gospel to me and everybody at the VBS, obviously. And yeah, I mean, I just remember like the gospel being presented in such a way as like only as a 5-year-old could understand. It was like basically like Jesus was like almost like a superhero, and he needed to save you. Like, I remember like from that moment. And yeah, I mean, so like in that basic faith, like just like I needed a savior, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, they asked like, who has accepted Jesus, all those kinds of things. I raised my hand, took me into the sanctuary, and I prayed the sinner's prayer and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, from there, I don't really remember like anything after that though, which is kind of interesting. Like, I don't remember like any sort of discipleship or follow up. I don't even remember if like my parents knew like in that time or whatever. And so yeah, from there, just kind of like went on living life. I mean, I was 5 years old. I knew I was saved. I knew Jesus saved me from the bad stuff that they told me about, and all those kinds of things. And so so I just went on living my life and doing what I thought was what was right. So like I had this salvation, but then I was like, I had no direction on what it meant to be a Christian and like what a true Christian looks like, all those kinds of things. And so leading into my teenage years, like I felt like I was like every typical teenager, just rebellious, running with the wrong crowd, finding myself just chasing after any sort of like pleasure and whatever I felt was good and all those kinds of things. Yeah, so when I was all that leading up until about I was like 16, and I was sitting in my room one night. I don't even remember like why I was just sitting there alone, but I just started thinking about like my life and like, I had like some issues with some girlfriends at the time, which just kind of made me feel like depressed and sad and all those kinds of things. And I was just kind of thinking like, my life hasn't really been that great up until this point. And I feel like no one really loves me. Like, that was like the kind of the feeling that I had in that moment. And I tried to start to think about like, well, there has to be somebody in my life that loves me. I started thinking about my friends and all that kind of stuff. Like, they must love me. And as I thought about it, I was like, I feel like my friends are just kind of like they're just using me for something or whatever it may be. And I feel like more discluded by them than I do anybody else. And I was like, well, if my friends don't love me, my parents must love me, right? And then I started thinking about our relationship and how it was kind of tumultuous, and I was kind of, the typical teenager, like I said, like very combative against them and all those kinds of things. And, me and my dad didn't have the best relationship. And so I was like, okay, well, obviously my parents, probably don't love me. And like just in that dark place of just thinking like no one was there. All that led to me thinking about God, like, God must love me. If anybody else must love me, it must be God. And the more I thought about my relationship with God, the more I was like, well, I haven't really like, been living my life for him or, even anything remotely like that since I was like 5. Like, I had those moments or had that moment with him when I was 5. And yeah, so I was like, so if God doesn't love me, if my parents don't love me, if my friends don't love me, then it's like I just came to the conclusion like, well, why am I alive? And in that moment, I contemplated taking my own life, and I remember like thinking about like how it was going to happen and all that kind of stuff. But then I was like, okay, before I do it, I'm gonna pray, not pray to like ask God for help, but pray to just yell at him, like, blame him for everything that's happening and all those kinds of things. And so as I started to do that, and as I started to just say, like, it's your fault. Why'd you make me this way? Why'd you make no one love me? Yada, yada, yada. I just remember hearing a voice say, everything's going to be okay. And like, that was just like the smallest, simplest, everything's going to be okay in that moment, in that darkness. It just made me start crying even more. Like, I was just like, what does that even mean? In that moment, like, what does that mean? And like, as I thought about it later, like, it was really just like a confirmation of the gospel in my life. Like, it was like what the salvation that I had when I was 5 meant that now in my darkest moments, everything's going to be okay. Like, I'm going to get through it. It's going to, this too shall pass, so to speak. I just remember like sobbing just even more and more, but being thankful and feeling that peace in my heart. And with those words that I heard, it felt like God was just wrapping his arms around me and, giving me a big hug. And I just felt that like warmth and that peace. Yeah, so from there, I was like, just like like I knew it was God. Like if anything, he was just answering my prayer and answering my, my, I don't know what we want to call it, like just anger or whatever it may be. And with the most amount of grace and love that I'd ever had known in that moment. And so yeah, from there I was just like, I'm gonna get rid of those friends. I'm gonna start living my life for Jesus. I'm gonna figure out what it means to be a Christian and how what it means, how Christians live, all that kind of stuff. Sought out my youth pastor at the time and just say, hey man, like you need to disciple me, like in some aspect, like we need to meet together or whatever. Like I just need to know what it means to be a Christian. And so yeah, from there, just really pushed in heavily into discipleship. And a couple years later, I was going to graduate school, and I felt the call in the ministry. Like I just knew God wanted me to serve Him in some way through church. And it just so happened my youth pastor went to Davis College, and he connected me with that school, and I fell in love with it. And from there, I went on to study to be a pastor. Yeah, I mean, just lots of growth from that time, from when I was 16 until I graduated college in I don't even remember the year now. It feels like forever ago. But yeah, when I graduated college, just met a lot of good mentors, a lot of good friends, a lot of good peers that just like helped me grow in my faith. And yeah, the summer, actually the fall of my senior year, um, I remember getting the call into uh, the head of student development's office, and she just called me in and like she sat me down, and then she didn't say a word to me, which was like really bizarre. I had been dating my girlfriend at the time, which is now my wife. As we had been dating, so I thought maybe like because we had like been close to coming back for curfew one night, so I was like maybe I'm in trouble that way or something like that. But she didn't say anything. And then she brought in my RD, and then she brought in my pastor, who was like one of my teachers, but I also went to his church at the school. And I was like, okay, this is really bizarre. And so she just told me, I remember her saying, she wouldn't say anything. She's like, you just need to call your family. And I was like, okay. And then I called my family. They didn't say anything to me, just other than you need to get home. And I was like, okay. And then my the head of student development left, and then my RD left, and I just remember sitting in that room, being like talking to my pastor, being like, "You need to tell me what is happening. Like, I just feel like I don't want to know. Like, I don't want to be not aware of what's going on." And he was like, in this, most loving way that you can tell somebody, he was like, "Your dad has taken his own life." And in that moment, it was like immediately, like I was back in that room when I was 16, like just like the whole world just came crumbling down around me. I remember just sitting in that room and him hugging me, not saying a word, and just crying together. That moment, like I tell him that all the time, we still talk and stuff. And I'm like, that moment meant the world to me. Just no words, no nothing, just, love. And yeah, so from there, my wife, my girlfriend at the time, but my wife now, she drove me home. Bless her heart, 6 hour drive back to Akron, and the whole time just sitting there, just like in quiet, just like thinking about like what am I going to do? What does this mean? Like again, like it just felt like the whole world was just crumbling down around me. And got home, shared all the tears that I could ever have with my family. And where he had taken his life was down in the basement of our home. He was a police officer, and so he had like all his stuff down there and all that kind of stuff. And he had his desk down there where he would like, pay the bills and all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, I have to go downstairs. And I don't know why I felt that way, but I was just like, I have to go downstairs. And so I did and walked downstairs, standing at his desk. And on his desk was a Bible that I had gotten him I think it was that year actually for his birthday. And in that Bible was a bunch of verses bookmarked, but one that stood out to me was 2 Corinthians 12, verses 9 through 10, which if you know any context of that verse, like Paul is talking about, Lord, please take this thorn from my side. And God's response to Paul is, my grace is sufficient enough for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Yeah, and like just hearing those words, just having those verses there, was so powerful for me in my life, because again, it felt like God was saying everything's going to be okay. And yeah, and I just read those verses over and over again. Read them for many years to come. Still reading those verses every day, just as like a way of just reminding myself everything's going to be okay. Yeah, from that moment on, I felt okay. Like even that was the first time all day that I felt like it was going to be okay. And I'm thankful for God for that. And yeah, from then on, like, stayed home with my mom, all that kind of stuff. Finished my senior year, even that year. That was because my mom wanted me to do that. I wanted to make sure I was there for her, but like she was like, no, you need to go back to school is what your dad would want. And so I finished my senior year that year, got married, had my daughter a couple months, like, me and my wife had gotten pregnant a couple months after we got married. And so then I became a dad, and it's just like from then on, God's just been providing, reminding me of that, through all of the stuff that's happened. Like it feels like since my dad passed away, just life had happened so fast, like getting married, having my daughter, and then it's just like, just one whirlwind after another. But again, God's grounded me in those verses of like, my power is made perfect in weakness. My grace is sufficient enough for you. So, yeah, that's pretty much my story up until, that point. I mean, up until as far as like major life stuff happening, and, just became an elder and a pastor at my church this past year, all that kind of stuff. And been working at a company called Tithely for the past, almost 4 years now in August. And God, again, has just been, nothing but providing for me and for my family and just helping me, stay through it all. And I always say it's a lot of my life has felt like, how where you go to the ocean, and like sometimes I would love to like just run into the waves, and sometimes when you run into the waves, like it'll knock you over, and those waves will just keep you down underneath the current, where you feel that pressure like holding you down. And a lot of my life has felt like that, like I'm just under the waves, under the pressure, and I can barely get up for air. But in recent years, it's felt more so like, I'm not under that pressure. I'm just thinking I'm feeling the waves, but in the reality is I'm surrounded by God. I'm surrounded by his fortress. And I always think about that picture of like, you see the lighthouse with like the huge wave that's crashing on the wall of the lighthouse, but the waves are coming around it. And that's how I picture how God has provided for me through my life. It's just me standing in that fortress, and those waves are crashing around, and I feel the waves. I feel the wetness of the waves, the water, or like the mist, right? But in actuality, I'm not being pulled under. And just having that mindset for me has just really helped move through a lot of that stuff that I've dealt with when I was a teenager, all the stuff with my dad, and even like, through some difficult circumstances with my wife and my daughter, and just like having to work 4 jobs during COVID and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, yeah, it's been a crazy life, but it's been one of provision and protection. So
How has that experience with your father shaped you as a father?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think for me, it's just like being honest, like what I'm feeling with my kids, like not being like my dad was very he was like born in the 50s, like 1949, so he grew up in that age where it's just like yeah, he just hide it all inside, like if you would have asked me, like, did you see any signs of my dad doing what he did? Like, there would have been none. Nobody in my family would have known what was gonna. And so for me, I'm like, I want to be more. I want to be open and honest with my daughter. Oh, I have a son now too. So both of them with like my feelings and how I'm feeling and how I'm, uh, um, you know, working through all those things as well, and saying, and also saying it's like it's okay to have those feelings. Like I think my daughter is a very big feeler, and so like being just telling her it's okay. Like you can feel sad, you can feel angry, whatever it may be, and then trying to work with her through those feelings and stuff like that. So yeah, so that's probably the biggest way is if I compare like to what maybe he did as a father to what I'm doing now and how that's different. That'd probably be the biggest difference, I would say.
What is one memory that you're thankful for about your dad?
Yeah, that's a great. There's too many to pick. To be honest, he was always a funny guy. Always joking around. Always made people laugh. Life of the party kind of thing. I just remember like he always. I was telling my mom like he would always mess around with me and my sisters, and I'll never forget he for Halloween he loved Halloween too. That was the biggest holiday. So he'd always try to prank us around Halloween. And one Halloween he got me really good. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to the store," and he said, and so I thought he left, and then he calls me and he's like, "Oh, I forgot my wallet," which his wallet was again in the basement where he had all his stuff. And so he's like, "Can you go downstairs?" And I remember going downstairs, and he's standing on these like stilts, and like he's making himself look taller than he is, and he has like the costume on that doesn't have a face, and he didn't say anything to us, and so we just walked down the basement, and I remember running up the stairs and trampling over my little sisters at the time who were with me, and when he saw that he bursted out laughing, and he never let me live it down that I like sacrificed my sisters to whatever was in the basement. So, but it was pretty funny. That stuff like that I think about all the time, and just like a lot of laughs. Just anytime he always cracks a joke, always plays a prank or whatever it may be. But like that's probably the one I gravitate towards the most because he always thought it was so funny that I was so scared that I just ran my sisters over. But I was like, I was getting out there, man. I'm not messing around with nothing. I told them to move and they didn't. So yeah.
How did it affect your sisters, and how were you able to like help them?
Yeah, I mean, my sisters were really young when it happened. I was thankfully, I mean, I was an adult. And I mean, like I said, just about to graduate college. And so, yeah, my youngest sister was still in junior high. My oldest sister was in high school, and I think they still wrestle with it probably more than I do in some aspects. My oldest sister was actually there when it happened, like, and everything like that. Like, yeah, we don't need to get all the details, but like, so there's a lot of stuff that they deal with that I hadn't had to deal with, other than just being and like obviously they were living with him at the time. I had I was at college away in New York. So like I had been not living with him for 3 years basically, and so for them, a lot of trauma and a lot of hurt that has happened or that is still causing them pain from that. And I think that's just because of the differences in our circumstances. And for me, again, it's like just reminding them about the Lord and how and telling them how the Lord has helped me, and being able to pray for them and all that kind of stuff. And I try to be as much as I can. I mean, my mom's very involved in their lives too, which I think is really good. But I try to be as involved as I can with their lives, and like I don't want to say like being the man in their life or whatever, but like trying to. And I don't want to say I want to replace my dad, but like obviously like my sister, has a boyfriend, and so it's like I'm meeting him and talking to him and all that kind of stuff, and trying to give her advice as much as I can. But it's still like I think the main way I help is just trying to remind them about what God's taught me through those situations and everything like that.
Were they part of a church during this time?
During the time that my dad passed away,
Yeah.
yeah, like not really. There's been a lot of conversations with my mom just about like being involved in a church consistently. And just recently, over the past couple of years, she's gotten really involved in a church, which is great. But there's a lot of stuff in her story where like there's a lot of church hurt and stuff like that that happened. Like she was a Catholic and then she, converted to Protestantism. And yeah, one cool story about my mom is like when she became Protestant, she went back to her priest and she was like, "Hey, why'd you never tell me how to get to heaven?" and like, and so like she's just that kind of a blunt person, which I think is really cool that she did that. But I think there's a lot of like we don't. I think from that there's a lot of for her, maybe just a lot of like we don't need the church kind of thing. But like as one way I was helping them or helping or trying to be some sort of counsel in my mom's life and my sister's life, been encouraging them to go to church and get connected into the community. And just recently, my mom has really found a church that she can feel plugged into. So, and I think that's caused a lot of like, for them, maybe a lot of hurt, a lot of loneliness as well. Cause like, I remember like telling my mom, like, you need to get involved in maybe some like, grief counseling stuff at a church or something like that, or find some other ladies that have been through some sort of loss or something. Cause that's something that's helped me too. Like just being like, it's funny how God, like, for me, I feel a lot more empathy towards people that have lost someone as well. And so therefore like God's like brought people in my life that have also lost people. And so it's like, it's interesting how you can find a community and like, connect together over something so traumatic. And just like being able to say, yeah, I know how you feel, I think is a big thing. So, but yeah, thankfully she is a part of the church now, which is good.
So, how's your relationship with your father-in-law?
With my father-in-law. Yeah, really good. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I asked him if I could marry his daughter, I said like, because I had asked him after my dad had passed away, I'm asking more than just to marry your daughter. I'm asking you, one, to be my dad, and also to be my children's only grandfather. And I think that's for me. I've really leaned into him for that reason of not having a dad, and he's a good man and good godly man, and I appreciate having an older male figure in my life like that in my family. And yeah, I feel like we have a really good relationship, and just able to learn from him as much as I can. He's involved in a church as well. He's an elder at a church too, so it's like it's nice to have, because my dad was never a part of that like ministry or anything like that. So it is nice now, like even though my dad's passed away, I feel like I have an older man that's been through some of the things that I've been through and is able to mentor me and talk me through some things that I'm dealing with now, even as I step into a pastoral role.
So, how has all those things shaped you as a pastor? And has there been like a situation where like your experience has been like a strength or like a gift to a situation?
Yeah, I mean, I remember early on, like, so before I'm at this job at my church now or this pastoral role, I was a youth pastor at a church in another church in Syracuse, and I remember one day getting a call that one of the members of our congregation had gotten the news that her son had overdosed, and I think for me, like in like learning from what my pastor did when he told me about my dad is like just be there. Like it was just like it's not about like you don't need to come in with like something to say like and I think a lot of people approach the situations with like I need to have some sort of like verse ready or I need to have some sort of like quote or something. I don't know, whatever whatever you feel like you need to do. But like I felt like from what I had learned and what had helped me through that situation, I was like, I just need to be present in some way. And so like, being at their house or calling them and saying, praying for you, all that kind of stuff. Those kinds of things, I think just went a long way. It's like, just knowing someone's there, someone you can lean on, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like that's what's helped me the most as a pastor through some of those things is like just having that ministry of presence. And because like I said, for me, it was huge. It still affects me to this day, how like loved I was in that moment. And he didn't say anything to me. He just told me, my dad passed away and then he hugged me. Like that was it. Yeah, so like that situation, I feel like, or that's helped me in further situations. And again, going back to what I said, like having all that empathy for people that lose someone. Cause like, you don't honestly know what it's like, until you're in it. like until you've lost someone. Like you can kind of sort of know and like sort of empathize. Like obviously that's going to be a traumatic situation, lose anybody in your life. But like until you've actually gone through it, like you just never. It's all the emotions, all the things. Like it's way deeper than anyone can ever imagine. So like having gone through that, like I can just feel like I know what they're feeling about. I don't need to talk to them, and that's another thing. Like again, going back to that presence, I don't need to talk to them. I don't need to ask them how they're doing. I just need to be there, and be around them and like offer any sort of assistance that I can. And I think that's like one of the things I heard in the middle of all that, because like after everything that happened with my dad, my pastor kind of told me why he did what he did. And he was like, that's what they used to do in Jewish culture. It was like you just sat in a room and didn't say a word. But it was like just the fact of having people around you is what made you feel good. And so I've really taken that to heart. And yeah, as weird as it sounds, I feel like God has used what's happened with my dad in tremendous ways, through different counseling opportunities or whatever it may be, or discipleship opportunities. And it's funny, like it's not like I don't want to say I get excited, but I love like pastoral care ministry. Like I love going to hospitals, like or whatever I can do, like giving that call, being there. It's like as in a weird way, God brings joy out of my situation, because it's like now I get to help somebody, and I think that's what brings joy, not the situation itself. Obviously, that'd be crazy, but obviously, like being able to be that person that knows what they're going through and offer help, has been a big thing for me. And yeah, normally people don't really enjoy all that stuff, but I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll raise my hand, that kind of thing. So,
How did you meet your wife?
so we met at college. Yeah, I met her my senior year, and yeah, we started dating. Yeah, she was. Funny story that she loves to tell is she sat in my line of view in the cafeteria all the time, and then I got her. I felt like I was a creeper, and I tell her this all the time. I was like, I remember when we first started dating, I was like, every time I look up in the cafeteria, you're sitting there, like you're in front of me. She's like, yeah, that was on purpose. I was like, okay. I was like, I'm so glad that wasn't me being a weirdo. Yeah, so we met at school and got married the May after my dad had passed away. And yeah, we've been together for 9 years now.
How did you know like she's the one?
Yeah, she was the first woman that I felt was mature, right? Like, I don't want to like disparage. I mean, I had girlfriends in high school and some girlfriends in college before I met my wife, but it was like the first one where she was like, she knew what she wanted. She wasn't going to compromise anything. She knew who she was in Christ. It was like, there was just a maturity level for her, that I had like felt that I had needed and wanted. And that was like why I knew, and like that part of it, like her character in that, but also like when she found out that my dad died, like they brought her in the office and all that kind of stuff with me. I asked everyone to bring her in, and her immediate thing was like, well, let's go, like let's drive, like, and she was willing to just drop everything. She didn't care about anything else. And I was like, yeah, this is definitely a woman that I need to have by my side for the rest of my life, where she's so willing and so caring and so ready to just fight for me. And yeah, it was, yeah, it made sense in my mind. I was like, there's no other option. This is her.
She sounds like a gift.
Yeah, for sure.
A
And she's that
couple
way with my kids, which is awesome too. She's like so focused and strong. Yeah, it's just amazing. She's awesome.
a couple of last questions. I know you got to go.
Yeah.
Do you plan on sharing with your kids who your dad was?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we already have in some ways. They both know that he's passed away, and there's pictures of him and stuff like that, and we always say, "Oh, that's Grandpa," and because he was a police officer, so like my son loves Paw Patrol, and he loves Chase in that show, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's what Grandpa used to do. He was a police officer," and all that kind of stuff. So there's like little ways, and my mom obviously, when we go to my mom's house, she talks about him a lot, and like there's more pictures of him around and everything like that. So like they know, and yeah, they're sad not to know him, and I'm sad that he doesn't know them, but they're still getting his memory, and as much, because every time we go to my mom's, it's always like talking about him and talking about different things that we did growing up. And so they know a lot about him. Yeah, I want them to know him as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm learning how to honor people that have passed. It's just by remembering them.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, it's like, if you ever seen that movie, what's it called? Coco. It's a Disney
Oh yeah,
movie.
yeah, yeah. About the
Yeah,
dead.
yeah, exactly. And like, yeah, that message in that movie is the same thing. It's just like honoring the people who have come before you. And yeah, I love all that stuff. I love finding like old pictures of him and all those kinds of things, and showing the kids, and just reminiscing as much as possible. Because yeah, it makes you feel good too, even though they've passed. It's like it just gives you that memory, that good memory to enjoy for a little bit.
Yeah, there were a reason. There's a reason why they were in your life in the first place.
Yep, yep, exactly.
Last question is, how can we be praying for you and your family?
Yeah, I mean, my life has changed drastically since January. I just got a new job at Tithely, or a new position at Tithely. Traveling a lot more, and so like it's like almost every other week I'm going somewhere, and that's just put a lot of strain on my life and my family and everything like that. Just navigating all those kinds of things. All good things and nothing bad. It's just being away from the house, more often than not. And so just pray for that. Pray that I stay intentional with my family and my kids. Help me not to fall back on the excuse of tiredness to not do something. Like try to help me. Pray for that I would push through, have the energy, whatever it may be. And yeah, pray for my wife as she stays home with the kids. Like she stays home with them all the time. So just pray for patience and calmness for her as she deals with all that stuff. And yeah, pray as I step into this new role as the elder, as an elder and pastor at my church. Just pray that I can manage those two things well, because I never, I yeah, like going into Davis, I always thought it was going to be full vocational ministry. So it's an interesting world to kind of balance both, like a bivocational ministry thing. So it's hard. And I just want to make sure I'm faithful to my church, faithful to my family, faithful to my job. So just pray that I navigate all that as well as possible. So
Thanks for coming on, Brandon. It's been
yeah, thank you for having me.
nice knowing you.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's my
I'll see
pleasure.
you.